Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to another episode of What's Up with Power. My name is Justin Wagner with Team ODZ, and we have got this show to help you learn the basics of training with power. You can take your training to the next level. That's what we're here for, and we'd like to bring in guest coaches who have expertise to teach us a little bit and give you an opportunity to engage with them and ask questions. That's why we make it a live stream. So we will have 15 minutes of coaching and teaching, and afterwards we will open it up for questions and answers. So if you have questions, you can let them fly during the teaching section, or wait till afterwards. Bring them up in the Facebook chat or in Discord. We attempt to see them in game. We don't always see all the questions in game. But if you want to get it answered for sure, I'd definitely go to Facebook. And so let me bring Taylor on screen. How's it going, Taylor?
Good, Justin. How are you?
I am doing great. Give me just a moment here to give some announcements in the ride here. This is a group ride. Not a race. (1.5 to 1.8 miles per kg). Watching the presentation on WUWP live.com. Okay. One second. I'm slow typing. Okay. And the group ride is beginning here in 3, 2, 1. I'm gonna go. Oh, I think that's why it's squeaking, because I'm losing air in my rear tire. Okay, well, I'm gonna turn it over to you, Taylor, while I attempt to hold 1.5 watts per kilo on a tire that is losing air rapidly. So here you go.
Good luck with that. All right, so yeah, we'll dive right in today. We're going to talk about why you should train with power. This is partly pulled from Chapter 1 of Training and Racing with a Power Meter, which is kind of a primary book that everybody that gets into training with power should invest in. So we're going to dive into some of the specifics and go into some detail about why it's basically worth your time and valuable to your training to train with power. So, Justin, if you're not on the first slide already, you can go ahead and go there. So, one of the key things, or the best things that training with power helps us do, is identify our strengths and weaknesses very, very clearly. So, unlike other metrics like perceived exertion or heart rate, power does a really good job at identifying or helping us identify and pinpoint our strengths and weaknesses. So the first step in doing that with power is by utilizing the data. We want to go out, we want to ride, we want to record the power. So we want to ride with power, we want to record with power, and then we want to do really the most important step, which is a post-ride analysis. So we want to start to look for what the power looks like during different types of rides. So whether it's just a endurance ride, whether it's hill repeats, interval session, whatever that is, we want to do those types of workouts. We want to ride, perform them with power, record that power, and then we want to do a post-ride analysis to start to look for any sort of trends, insights, and over time, in pretty short order, those strengths and weaknesses will start to come to light. So I mentioned another training metric being heart rate. One of the things that power does a really good job at is identifying the gaps and the deficiencies in relying on heart rate solely for training. So heart rate by nature is hyper variable. It's affected by our nutrition, by our sleep, caffeine intake, stress, all these types of things on a daily basis at any given moment are affecting our heart rate. And so when we rely on heart rate just or on perform our training just based on heart rate, we get this variability mixed in, and so it's very hard to make any sort of assertive judgments and apply any of those insights to our training based specifically or solely on heart rate. Power does a really good job at contextualizing that heart rate. So when compared with power or against power, heart rate begins to be a little clearer. And so it's important to train with heart rate and power, but power certainly shows where heart rate falls away. It is not the best metric for tracking our training, specifically our physiological adaptations to that training. The training stimulus, so we want to know when, why, and how to apply the appropriate training stimulus. Power, like I mentioned, helps us pinpoint exactly where our strengths and weaknesses are, and thus we can know exactly what types of training, so what types of efforts specific to the areas that we want to see growth in, we can see exactly or know exactly what those efforts should look like. So again, versus something like heart rate or perceived exertion, where there's some variability in there, there's room for guessing. Power is really very clear cut, and we can know exactly what we need to do from an effort perspective. And then lastly, race day data. So going out and racing with power is really the best way or one of the best things we can do to get really, really valuable data into the type of rider that an athlete is. Again, where their strengths and weaknesses lie. So reviewing critical segments in a race, breakaways, hill climbs, sprints, all those types of things are providing really, really sound and reliable data to then help you base your subsequent training and the efforts that you produce in that in your training to base that on. Next slide, Justin. So it also helps with coaching. So this slide will obviously maybe be slightly biased since I'm a professional coach and all of the athletes that I work with train with power. But certainly, if you're going to be working with a coach, power is the best way to take advantage of the relationship between you as the athlete and the coach. So as a coach, the thing that we do is that we focus on dose and response. So we provide a dose of training. So whether that's a particular effort, an interval, an entire workout, we provide a dose, and then we look for the response. And so the response tells us how the athlete is adapting to that dose, how their fitness is progressing, what things look like from a stress perspective, and then again, what's going on specifically from a physiological perspective. So what systems in the body are being developed, and are they being developed appropriately for the goals that we've set out or set forth to accomplish? So power is the best way to make sure that the dose and response align, right? If I provide a dose to an athlete, they go out and do the workout, it's very clear what the response is. The power numbers tell me what if the dose was appropriate. It also, to that end, provides better training prescription. So the prescription would be just the writing of the workout, what a coach provides for the athlete to do from a workout perspective. Once you have a better understanding of the athlete's strengths and weaknesses, you understand the types of the type of dose and then ultimately the response that produces. You can then provide very, very clear and very, very individualized training prescription to the athlete. So power is really best at allowing coaches to do that. Clearer communication between the coach and the athlete. So when an athlete produces a particular effort, again, no matter what type of effort that is, it's very, very clear from a numbers perspective what what that athlete was going through, right? If the athlete hit all the numbers in the workout, then that sends a very clear signal that the workout went well, and that again the dose and the response lined up. If that's not the case, then that communication, or rather, then that probably opens lines of communications to talk about where room for adjustment needs to be and what needs to happen. So again, kind of the idea that there's no hiding behind the numbers. You either can hit the power intervals and hit the power prescription, or you can't, or you didn't, and that becomes a much more cut and dry conversation between a coach and an athlete. And then lastly, if you're racing on a team, power is great for a variety of reasons. One, just like I mentioned in the last slide about reviewing race day data, we can do this with teams and see who's best suited for particular jobs or positions on that team. So somebody has great sprint power, maybe they're the lead out person. If somebody has great sustained power, maybe they're going to lead a breakaway on a hill climb. Whatever that position and whatever that particular discipline calls for, you can see that really clearly with power. And then secondly, it really provides confidence for the team as well. Everyone can see each other's power numbers and see how the team is progressing as a whole. Even if each of those team members aren't good at the exact same things, you can see how the team is aligned, and see how as a group everyone is preparing for race day, but preparing within their own strengths, and using other team members to kind of subsidize the weaknesses. Next slide. Using power as a motivator. I think this is a big one now that we have things like smart trainers and Zwift, and most people have access to power. We can really use these numbers as a way to propel athletes forward, and kind of step outside of or find another means for motivation. So kind of the biggest and best one for most people is maximizing your time. Most athletes are short on time. Most athletes have a very short number, a very small amount of hours in the week to dedicate to training. They want to maximize that training time. In order to do that, power is the single best way to make sure that that happens. And it really eliminates, the kind of quote unquote junk miles, where you get on your bike and you maybe spin for no reason, or you're riding and you're not sure if you're producing the physiological adaptations that you're hoping for. When you adhere to power targets and a power-based training approach, you're making sure that each pedal stroke, in a sense, is worthwhile, and so you can really condense the amount of time, your training time down to because you're being more efficient. So maximizing your time is really huge, and really a fantastic kind of side effect almost for power-based training. Bike fit is another big one. So we can look at the relationship between speed and power, and we can identify pretty readily and pretty easily any fit adjustments that need to be made. And so what we're looking for is efficiency. If we can produce more speed at the same power, that's a more efficient pedal stroke. And so if we can do that by making adjustments to an athlete's bike fit, to their position on the bike, then that's going to be less effort for more speed, which is a win all the time. So power provides a relationship between velocity and output that allows us to have some insight into potentially better positions for an athlete on the bike. Proper pacing, just like I mentioned before in the first slide, going out and riding different types of terrain. Power allows for the athlete to know if they're pacing or if they're holding a power that's sustainable for a given type of terrain or effort. So if it's a hill climb and that hill climb is 20 minutes, through training, you can understand what power you're able to hold for 20 minutes. specifically without blowing up. So if it's in the middle of a race, per se, or if it's in the middle of a long ride, you don't want to go all out for 20 minutes. So you know exactly what power you can hold. Same thing with a time trial, knowing what you can hold for, you know, if it's a 40K time trial and you're trying to do it in, you know, somewhere around an hour, you know what that power looks like. And then even if it's not specific high output efforts, if it's just an endurance ride and you're just going out and you're just getting in some base miles, you still understand how to pace yourself so that you're not stressing your body too much, that you're staying in, you know, say zone 2 for the duration, and that you're getting those aerobic benefits, and you're saving your legs for some harder workouts later in the training cycle. So pacing is really easy with power once you understand those numbers. And then lastly, indoor training. It makes indoor training dramatically more effective and efficient. Again, with things like smart trainers and Zwift, most people are doing increasingly more and more time indoors, and largely because of its efficiency. It's just a great, easy way to make sure that you get in a very productive workout. But by having no interruptions, so no stop signs, no traffic, you don't have to get your gear ready to go outside, especially this time of year if it's cold. It makes sure that that you're, again, like I said, you're kind of using your time, using your training hours as best you can. So cleaner approach to indoor riding. So by providing those very strict or those very precise power zones, you can execute those indoor rides. Because there's no interruptions, everything becomes much cleaner, much more efficient, and the workout as a whole is more productive. Next slide. So lastly, achieving peak performance. Power, really, with all of the technology advancements, the tools that most athletes have at their disposal. I'll say it again, you know, smart trainers, Zwift, power meters on their bike, head units, all of these tools that weren't necessarily available to everyone, you know, even 5 years ago. Now more and more cyclists have access to these tools, and it really all but guarantees that you'll get better, because you have insight into areas of your training and areas of your physiology that you never had before. So by applying power-based training and subsequently or ultimately the metrics that come along with that, you will get better as a rider. There's no doubt things that you were doing that you thought were impactful and effective, that probably weren't what you should be doing. They probably weren't the best use of your time, and power is going to highlight those things. You're going to be able to change them, adapt them, make them better, and in the end, that will make you a better rider. So stronger rider, faster rider, smarter rider. I think that's a big thing with power, is that you become a smarter rider. You understand how to dose your effort, when to control the effort, when to go hard, when to not, and you understand what those mean in terms of the effects that it has on your training long term. Advanced tools. So I dove into this a little bit just in the last point, but we all now have access to tools that essentially only the best pro riders in the world had just a handful of years ago. So whether that's platforms like Training Peaks, whether that's tools like WKO4, Best Bike Split, again, very sophisticated cycling computers, the head units on all of our bikes, whether we're looking at estimates of VO2 max, estimates of FTP, Strava live segments, all these types of things that now we use on a daily basis. No one had access to, just a short while ago. So all of these tools, and if you, again, the important thing is that you utilize them properly. All of these tools really drive, kind of the quote unquote the modern cyclist drive them forward at a much more advanced rate, and at a much smarter rate than cyclists and athletes had the opportunity to be at even, again, a few years ago. And then lastly, learning and understanding the data. So all of this is great. Power is a phenomenally impactful tool and metric to a cyclist training. It's, like I said, will absolutely make you a better rider, but it's only as good as your ability to understand the information that it's providing. So take time to learn and understand the data. Make sure that you understand your strengths and weaknesses. Make sure you're doing post-ride analysis. Check into your training, dive in and understand what those numbers mean. And then once you have a handle on that, use it to inform the training that you're doing down the road. So using the numbers, not just understanding them, right? It's one thing to know what 200 watts means for you. It's really the end goal to understand how to apply that knowledge to make you a better rider. So that's why training with power is important. I'll kick it back over to Justin. We'll take it to the question and answer section.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Taylor. Before we jump too quick into talking further, I want to throw out a question. So if you have questions, definitely let them come. But I also want to ask you guys a question. So do you already have a power meter? Or are you training? Have you started your winter training? Let us know in the comments if you already use a power meter, or if you don't, if you're thinking about getting one. Kind of let us know where you're at. We're actually just starting up a new round of presentations. This is essentially chapter 1 from the book, and we'll be progressing through the book. So the more we know about you and what you want to get out of the series, the more we can help tailor it as we go forward. Or the more I can have tailor it for you. See what I did there?
Oh, yes. Yeah, the classic joke on my name.
I'm sure you've never heard that one before. I'm sure I'm the first.
That's never been done before, Justin. You're the first one to make that connection.
Yes, I did something right today. Besides having a trainer that's failing, and everyone's going to be telling me how I should have a direct mount trainer that has no tire resistance problems. I'm sure I won't hear the end of those. But yes, I can at least...
I was going to be the first to jump in and ask why you didn't have direct drive.
Well,
the man leading the group ride has to have the best equipment, don't you know?
Well, in my mind, it is the best. So I have the Kurt Kinetic Rock and Roll, and I like the fact that it is fluid and goes back and forth. So,
right. Yeah. I've used the Rock and Roll for a long time.
The cost of, I think I've had like 2 flats a year, maybe. So I think that $10 a year will make up for the cost difference over several years between this and the kicker. Okay, so in the game, M. Kuntz says he's just starting with power. So must probably just join Zwift, just getting power numbers. Yeah, it's good. So as we progress, Kuntz will be getting into more and more advanced concepts in the show. We're going through the book. So the book we talk about is Training and Racing with the Power Meter. If you don't have it, we definitely recommend going out and getting it. I think it's like, what, $15 on Amazon, Taylor?
Yeah, and there's even used copies on it. There's thousands of copies on Amazon. I mean, I literally think you can pick one up for a couple of bucks, from a different, from a warehouse somewhere.
You may even be able to check it out from your library. It might be there.
Right, yeah.
So definitely, if you're just getting started with power and kind of curious about what it brings to the table, definitely recommend to read, hands down. Especially if you're going to be trying to do your own coaching, definitely recommend that. Okay, we've got another comment here. It says, okay, talking about the rock and roll. Stunning trainer, says Lena Botha. To myself, some problems here and there with it, but Kinetic Rock and Roll is best. So by the way, we don't get paid. This is not paid advertising for Kurt Kinetic. I just want to make that clear, but actually...
We started something we didn't intend to.
Yeah. Okay, so Gordon Ferrari, you have a power meter. How do you recommend setting up to do a bike fit? Oh, I lost that whole comment. Maybe talk a little bit further. I think he was curious about using a power meter in the bike fit and how,
Right.
yeah, I'll let you speak to that.
So that's a good question. Some of it requires just looking at data over time. So what I've done with athletes in the past, for instance, there might be a place where it shows up a lot is for time trialists. So if I have an athlete or I'm working with an athlete that the focus is a time trial, we through coach or through training, kind of over time in the build up to a time trial, we may because ultimately the end goal is to be aerodynamic, right? Because more aerodynamic equals more efficiency equals, like I said, less power, more speed. So we will work on different aerodynamic positions and look at the change in that athlete's ability to produce power at certain durations, right? So, what does that athlete's 5-minute power look like? What does their, 20-minute power look like? What does it look like? I mentioned kind of comparing it to heart rate. So, what does it look like in terms of kind of just aerobic response? What is the cardiovascular system doing during those different positions? And so one of the ways to do it is just to kind of play with bike fit and look for efficiencies. And you'll know if you go too far and you go on the other side of what the body is capable of doing in terms of fit, then the power falls away, right? Then you produce less speed at the same power. So you'll kind of test on one side and the other, and you'll find the sweet spot. The other way to do it is looking as you ride more, your body changes. You get more used to your bike. Typically, the more time you spend in the saddle, oftentimes you'll see riders will drop their handlebars down on the stem. Things will get more aggressive. That tilts their hips more, changes the pedal stroke fairly dynamically or fairly dramatically. So as you change as a rider, you can also look for those insights in power. And you might find, and what I've found a lot of times is that even just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something. So you'll find that those changes maybe aren't the most impactful for your riding because you're actually less efficient. So those are kind of the two ways. And again, it tends to be more focused around situations where aerodynamics is key. So individual time trials, although road races, can be important there too. So kind of the two big places.
Cool. So if we didn't quite if I didn't understand the gist of your question and we just answered it completely wrong, feel free to follow up with us at WUWP@TMODZ.com. That stands for What's Up with Power. He says thanks. Okay, sounds like we got a pretty good address there. So Lena Botha says, like to get a power meter, and prices are crazy and so many options. Well, okay, here's what I can answer to that. We actually had an episode last week, and when I get a second and I'm not in the middle of all this, I will post a link to it for you. You go back and I basically there's a post that's done annually by a guy named DC Rainmaker who helps you understand the whole market of power meters, because the answer to which power meter should I get is very personalized, and it depends on many things like how you want to do your training, how many bikes you have, what your goals are, indoor versus outdoor. And there's just, I say as a general rule of thumb, most people looking for a power meter want to get one they can use indoors and outdoors. That's generally, if you get a standard power meter, instead of a power meter built into a trainer, you're going to have the ability to use it outdoors, which is highly recommended. I'm not going to give you a specific model of a power meter just because it depends. And I would say that
Justin, we did an episode here on What's Up with Power about kind of which power meter is best. We did right arm power meter, center mount power meter. We did the
Yes.
whole kind of
Yeah,
way
exactly.
through. So that might
So
be,
that DC Rainmaker post was the motivation for that, actually. And so I just did another version of it last week. So I'll post a link to that where I kind of describe what the trade-offs are of a left-only versus dual-sided versus pedals versus hub versus crank arms. Like you said, it's a big world of power meters, and it's scary, and it can get very pricey. I'd say, there's a lot of good options coming in at lower price points, but I want to say generally we're still looking at about your entry level, not entry level, just the lowest price to get into a power meter is probably somewhere around $400. I think there may be options under that. Could be wrong. I think there might be some single-sided pedals that even came out maybe under 300. But in general terms, you're looking at $300 to $400 and up. The up goes up a lot, but generally the biggest uptick in price, other than just brand name, is if they have 2 strain gauges in them. So anytime it's dual left-right pedals, those are going to be more expensive than the left-only variant. So that's kind of hopefully gives you some information to help you answer that question. I realize you were looking for click here to buy now, but I'm not going to give that.
Well, I'll add too, just real quickly, and you probably covered this, but I think it's worth keeping in mind, that with those price points comes accuracy, right? And the power meter is great for all of the reasons that I just talked about being able to really inform your training and really have a very have a lot of impact on your ability to be very precise in your training. If there's a 15% variance in the numbers that you're getting from your power meter, that's not going to provide a lot of confidence in your ability to inform the training, right? So you want to be able to trust the numbers, and so there is a lot on the market now, and the barrier to entry has come down, but that isn't necessarily, again, everybody has a price point, but if you're going to make the investment, I think it's worth making an investment in a product that you can be confident in. And there's a lot of variance in some of those models that come in a little lower. So just my two cents, because you want to be able to rely on the numbers, and if you can't do that, then it's not really it's not serving its purpose.
Absolutely. And so if you're looking into a specific power meter and you want to purchase it, I would highly recommend you look up the in-depth review from DC Rainmaker. DC Rainmaker is an independent third party. He doesn't work for any power meter companies. He works for himself. He's a blogger. He makes money off people using his recommendations to buy products, but he doesn't through Amazon affiliate links. So he will do completely independent reviews, and he will do rides where he has multiple power meters on a bike, and he can give you a pretty good estimate of if that power meter is accurate or not. So definitely, if you're going to buy a power meter, I completely agree with Taylor said that I would not, if I could pay 25% of the price and lose accuracy, it's not worth it to me. If I could pay, you name the price, it becomes a random number generator at some point, and it doesn't help at all. Might as well just print out random numbers from my computer and send them to you after your ride. Yep. Okay, cool. So I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks everyone for coming. That's all the time we have for today. I've got a rear tire to repair, as I'm barely able to hold 100 watts because my tire keeps slipping, but we'll get that solved. Don't you worry. Thanks everyone for joining, and hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you back on here next week.